The medical station orbited peacefully above Kepler 442b when the Zephyrian destroyers emerged from hyperspace. Dr. Sarah Chun was finishing her rounds in the children's ward when the first energy blasts tore through the hull. The station had no weapons, no shields. Only the universal medical symbol that should have protected them under galactic law. Admiral Marcus Reeves stood in the command center of Earth's primary military station, watching the footage for the 20th time. His weathered hands gripped the edge of the holographic display as the Zephyrian ships systematically destroyed every escape pod, every medical shuttle trying to flee. 347 medical personnel. 52 children who were being treated. All dead. Sir, the Galactic Council has issued their standard condemnation, reported Commander Lisa Park, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. They're calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding? Reeves turned away from the display. The Zephyrian Empire had been pushing boundaries for months, testing human resolve. They controlled 60% of the galaxy now, their blue-skinned warriors conquering system after system. They viewed humans as weak, soft creatures who hid behind medical treaties and diplomatic words. "Get me Director Kane," Reeves ordered. Park hesitated. "Sir, the Obsidian Project has been sealed for good reason." The Senate voted unanimously to— "The Senate can go to hell," Reeves interrupted. "Get me Kane now." 20 minutes later, Director Kane materialized in the command center via secure holographic link. The man looked exactly as dangerous as his reputation suggested. Tall, lean, with scars across his face that spoke of violence both given and received. His pale eyes held no warmth, no mercy. "Admiral Reeves," Kane said, his voice like gravel. "I assume this is about the medical station." "It is." "How quickly can you deploy your people?" Kane smiled, and it was a cold thing. "Which ones?" "I have 300 of the most dangerous human beings ever born locked away in my facility. Murderers, torturers, war criminals so brutal that even our own military courts couldn't stomach keeping them in regular prisons." "The worst ones," Reeves said without hesitation. "The ones who scare other monsters." "Ah," Kane's smile widened. "You want the devil's dozen, 12 individuals so psychopathic, so utterly without conscience that they make serial killers look like kindergarten teachers? They're the ones we keep in solitary confinement even from each other." Commander Park stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, releasing war criminals violates every treaty we've signed with the Galactic Council. The Galactic Council can protect medical stations or they can protect their precious treaties," Reeves replied. "They can't do both." He looked back at Kane. "What do you need?" "Full pardons for anyone I deploy. Complete operational freedom. And Admiral ... Kane leaned forward, his image flickering slightly. "Once I release them, there's no putting them back in the box. These aren't soldiers who follow orders. They're apex predators who happen to be on our side." Reeves thought of Dr. Chun, who had spent her life saving others. He thought of the children in that medical ward, their small bodies floating in the cold vacuum of space. Do it. The Obsidian facility existed in a place that officially didn't exist. Built into an asteroid in the outer rim, it housed humanity's darkest secrets. Kane walked through corridors lined with the most advanced containment technology ever created. Each cell held someone who had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. He stopped at the first cell. Inside, a woman sat perfectly still on a simple metal chair. She looked ordinary brown hair, average height, unremarkable features. But Dr. Elena Vasquez had personally tortured information from over 400 enemy prisoners during the Centauri Wars. Her methods had been so effective and so horrifying that both sides had agreed to ban her techniques by treaty. "Elena," Kane said through the intercom, "how would you like to get back to work?" She looked up and her eyes were completely empty of human warmth. "Who needs to be broken, Director?" 3 cells down was Marcus "Ghost" Thompson, a man who had single-handedly infiltrated a fortified enemy city and killed 37 high-ranking officials in their sleep. He had done it for fun after his official mission was complete. The cameras had captured him whistling children's songs while he worked. "Ghost," Kane called. Want to hunt some aliens? Thompson materialized at the cell window like smoke given form. Despite being in solitary for 8 years, he moved with the fluid grace of a natural killer. Blue-skinned Zephyrians, I assume? I've been developing some interesting ideas about their anatomy. The recruitment continued through the facility. Victor the surgeon Petrov, who could keep enemies alive and conscious for weeks while extracting information. Sarah Black Widow Martinez, who had seduced and murdered an entire enemy command structure during a false peace negotiation. James Nightmare Foster, whose psychological warfare techniques had driven an entire enemy battalion to suicide. Each one was a master of their craft. Each one was completely, utterly without moral restraint. But the last cell Kane visited held someone special. The nameplate reads simply, Subject 0. Inside, a man sat reading a book of poetry. He was ordinary-looking, perhaps 50 years old, with graying hair and kind eyes. He looked like someone's grandfather. "Hello, Director Kane," the man said without looking up from his book. "I take it the Zephyrians have finally pushed too far?" This was Professor David Morrison, former ethics professor turned the most efficient killer humanity had ever produced. During the Proxima Rebellion, he had ended the war in 6 weeks by systematically eliminating not just enemy leaders, but their families, their friends, and anyone who might seek revenge. He had killed over 10,000 people with such methodical precision that enemy forces surrendered rather than face him. "They murdered medical personnel," Kane said. "Children." Morrison closed his book and looked up. His eyes held depths that made Kane, a man who managed 300 psychopaths, uncomfortable. "How many Zephyrians would you like me to kill, Director?" "All of them would be a good start." Morrison smiled, and it was worse than all the others combined because it looked genuinely warm. "Then I'll need my tools." Back on the command station, Admiral Reeves received the final authorization codes from Earth Command. The politicians were terrified, but they had authorized Project Obsidian. Humanity's monsters were being released to hunt. "Sir," Commander Park reported, "the Zephyrian fleet is massing near the Titan system. Intelligence suggests they're planning to hit our main supply depot next." "Let them come," Reeves said. "Kane's people will be waiting." In the depths of space, 12 transport ships launched from the asteroid facility. Each carried 1 passenger and their personal equipment. No escorts, no support fleets. Just 12 ordinary-looking transport vessels, carrying humanity's answer to the Zephyrian Empire's brutality. Dr. Elena Vasquez sat in her ship, reviewing Zephyrian anatomy files. She had spent years in confinement developing new techniques, new methods of extracting information and inflicting precise psychological damage. Her tools were already being fabricated by the ship's automated systems. Ghost Thompson meditated in his transport, visualizing the Zephyrian command structure. He had studied their military hierarchy during his imprisonment, identifying exactly which deaths would cause maximum chaos. His ship's cloaking systems were already engaging, Professor Morrison wrote in his journal, calculating probability matrices for maximum efficiency. He had developed new theories about strategic elimination during his years of confinement. The Zephyrians would be his test subjects on the command station. Admiral Reeves watched the 12 ships disappear into hyperspace. He had just unleashed humanity's most terrible weapons. Not ships or bombs or energy beams, but 12 human beings who had abandoned every moral restraint that made civilization possible. Commander Park stood beside him. "Sir, are we still the good guys after this?" Reeves thought of the medical station, of Dr. Chun's last transmission asking only that someone save the children. "The good guys don't win wars, Commander. They just get better funerals." The first phase of humanity's response was beginning. The Zephyrian Empire had wanted to see what humans were capable of when pushed beyond their breaking point. They were about to find out that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their courage. It was their capacity for calculated, methodical evil. When their children were threatened, the devil's dozen were loose, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 weeks after the Titan incident, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the gleaming chambers of the council station. their faces showing varying degrees of shock, outrage, and fear. Ambassador Kethva of the Zephyrian Empire stood before the assembly, his blue skin pale and his head tentacles trembling with barely controlled emotion. Behind him, holographic displays showed the carnage the Devil's Dozen had inflicted on his people's fleet. "Honorable delegates," Kethva began, his voice cracking, "what the humans have done violates every treaty of civilized warfare. They have unleashed criminals, terrorists, beings so depraved that even their own species imprisoned them." In the gallery reserved for human observers, Admiral Reeves sat motionless. Director Kane was beside him, watching the proceedings with cold amusement. The 12 empty seats behind them should have contained the Devil's Dozen, but they were still operating in the field. "The Zephyrian delegation calls for immediate sanctions against humanity," Kethva continued. "Total isolation until they surrender these war criminals for trial." Council Speaker Morgeth, an ancient being from the Eldorai Collective, raised a crystalline hand for silence. "Ambassador Kethva, remind us who struck first in this conflict." Kethva's tentacles writhed uncomfortably. "The medical station was a regrettable misunderstanding. Our forces believed it was a military installation. A medical station clearly marked with universal symbols, treating wounded children." Morgeth's voice carried centuries of judicial experience. "And your forces destroyed all escape pods to ensure no survivors?" Before Kethva could respond, the chamber's lights dimmed. Emergency alarms began sounding throughout the station. On every display screen, the same image appeared: Professor Morrison, sitting in what appeared to be the Council's own security center. "Good evening, delegates," Morrison said pleasantly. He was still reading his book of poetry, as if mass murder was just a hobby between verses. "I do hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Chaos erupted in the chamber. Security forces rushed toward the exits, only to find them sealed. Emergency protocols activated, but the station's defensive systems turned inward, trapping the delegates in their seats. "How is this possible?" Speaker Morgeth demanded. "This station has the most advanced security in the galaxy." Morrison looked up from his book with mild interest. "Oh, we've been here for weeks. Dr. Vasquez is currently having tea with your head of security." "Well, what's left of him?" "Ghost Thompson has been cataloging your defensive systems." "Such impressive technology." "Shame, it's designed to keep threats out, not to stop them once they're already inside." On Admiral Reeves's command tablet, a message appeared: Phase 3 initiated. All targets acquired. Around the galaxy, simultaneous strikes were occurring. The Devil's Dozen had used the 3 weeks since Titan to position themselves at every major Zephyrian military installation, government center, and colonial administrative hub. They had studied, planned, and prepared with the methodical precision of apex predators on Zephyr Prime, the Empire's homeworld. Victor, the surgeon Petrov, walked through the halls of the Imperial Palace. Guards lay behind him, not dead but modified. His surgical skills had been perfected during years of imprisonment, and he had developed new techniques for keeping subjects conscious and functional while completely helpless. The Zephyrian Emperor sat on his throne, surrounded by his most elite bodyguards. They watched the doors, expecting an army. Instead, a single human in maintenance coveralls walked in, whistling softly. "Your Imperial Majesty," Petrov said with a polite bow, "I've brought you a gift from the children of the medical station." The Emperor's guards moved to intercept, but they found their limbs wouldn't obey their commands. Petrov had modified them hours ago, introducing neural inhibitors through the palace water supply. They could see, hear, and think, but they couldn't move or speak. "You see," Petrov continued conversationally, "I've spent 8 years developing techniques for keeping subjects alive and aware during extended procedures. Your guards will make excellent test subjects for my latest theories." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out at every center of Zephyrian power. Sarah, Black Widow, Martinez had seduced and eliminated the entire Admiralty during a false peace negotiation. James, Nightmare Foster, had taken control of the Imperial communication network, broadcasting psychological attacks that were driving entire populations to madness. But the most devastating strike was yet to come. In the council chamber, Morrison closed his book and stood up. I have an announcement to make regarding humanity's position on galactic law. Speaker Morgeth tried to maintain diplomatic protocol. Human, this session is not— Oh, but it is, Morrison interrupted gently. You see, we've spent considerable time studying your various species during our imprisonment. Fascinating creatures, all of you? Each with such specific evolutionary fears. The chamber's environmental systems activated, pumping a barely detectable aerosol into the air. Within minutes, delegates began showing signs of species-specific terror responses. The reptilian saurians curled into defensive balls. The insectoid hive mind representatives began aggressive clicking patterns that indicated panic. Human terror is different, Morrison explained, walking among the paralyzed delegates. We're afraid of the dark, of being hunted, of things that look human but aren't quite right. But do you know what truly terrifies humans? The knowledge that we're capable of this. He gestured around the chamber, where some of the galaxy's most powerful beings sat helpless. Every human child learns the same bedtime stories. Tales of monsters in the woods, of things that hunt in the night, of evil that wears a friendly face. We tell these stories because we know the monsters are real. They live inside us. On Zephyr Prime, Emperor Tholanak found his voice as Petrov approached his throne. What do you want? Tribute? Territory? Surrender? Petrov smiled, and it was genuinely warm. Oh, Your Majesty, you misunderstand. We don't want anything from you. This isn't about conquest or politics or territory. He produced a small device from his medical kit, something that looked disturbingly organic. This is about justice. You see those children in the medical bay? They had names, hopes, dreams. Little Sarah Martinez was going to be an artist. Tommy Chun wanted to study xenobiology. They were innocent, and you killed them. The Emperor's voice cracked. It was war. Casualties happen in war? No, Petrov said, his voice still pleasant. War has rules. What you did was murder. And murder demands payment. In the council chamber, Morrison had reached the Zephyrian delegation. Ambassador Kethva stared at him with undisguised terror. Ambassador, Morrison said conversationally, I've done something unprecedented in galactic history. In the past 3 weeks, my colleagues and I have systematically destroyed your empire's entire command structure, neutralized your military forces, and taken control of your governmental systems. He paused to check his pocket watch. As of 17 minutes ago, the Zephyrian Empire ceased to exist as a political entity. Your homeworld is under new management. Your colonies have been redistributed to species you've oppressed. Your military has been disbanded permanently. The chamber erupted in horrified whispers. No single military action had ever toppled an interstellar empire. It was impossible. But here's the truly unprecedented part, Morrison continued. We're not keeping any of it. Humanity claims no Zephyrian territory. We want no tribute, no slaves, no spoils of war. We've simply erased you from existence and walked away. Speaker Morgeth managed to speak. That's impossible. You can't govern 47 star systems with 12 individuals. Morrison smiled that terrible grandfatherly smile. Who said anything about governing? The colonies have been given their independence. The homeworld has been, well, let's call it a nature preserve now. Very peaceful. No Zephyrians left to disturb the wildlife. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. An entire species. Billions of individuals. You committed genocide, Morgeth whispered. Did we? Morrison looked genuinely curious. The survivors are quite healthy, I'm told. Of course, there are only about 1,000 of them left, and they've been psychologically conditioned never to leave their designated reserve zones. But they're alive. Living examples of what happens when someone murders our medical personnel. Admiral Reeves stood in the gallery, his face carved from stone. This was beyond what he had authorized. This was beyond any rational response to the medical station massacre. But as he looked at Morrison's pleasant smile, he realized something chilling. This had always been the plan. You want to know the real secret of humanity? Morrison addressed the chamber. We're not the heroes of the galaxy. We never were. We're the monsters who learned to play nice. We built civilization, laws, ethics, medicine, all of it designed to keep our true nature in check. He walked back to the center of the chamber, where holocameras were broadcasting his words across the galaxy. But when you murder our children, when you attack the innocent, when you break the very laws that keep us civilized, Morrison's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the chamber. Well, then we stop pretending to be the good guys. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of Morrison's footsteps. The Zephyrian Empire is extinct. Not. The Zephyrian Admiral Vexanara stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Dawn, watching the human supply depot grow larger on his screens. The massive orbital station around Titan contained enough military supplies to fuel human resistance for years. Destroying it would cripple their war effort. "All ships report ready, Admiral," his tactical officer announced. The blue-skinned warrior's head tentacles twitched with anticipation. 47 heavy cruisers and 200 fighters. The humans have only basic defensive platforms. Vexanara smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Humans were weak, emotional creatures. Their outrage over the medical station had been predictable. Soon they would learn that the strong took what they wanted from the weak. "Begin the attack," he ordered. What Admiral Vexanara didn't know was that Dr. Elena Vasquez had been aboard his ship for 3 days. She moved through the ventilation systems with inhuman patience, her small frame allowing access to passages no full-grown Zephyrian could navigate. During her imprisonment, she had studied every alien anatomy file available, memorizing pressure points, weak spots, and psychological triggers specific to each species. Zephyrians were pack hunters by evolution. They feared isolation above all else. Elena emerged from a maintenance shaft directly behind the ship's chief engineer. Her blade slipped between his skull plates so precisely that he died without a sound. She dragged the body into a supply closet and took his uniform, disguised and moving with confident purpose. She began her work. The first sabotage was subtle. A few rerouted power couplings, some adjusted fuel mixture ratios. Nothing that would trigger alarms, but enough to cause system failures during combat stress. Then she moved to the crew quarters. The night shift security team found their comrades arranged in a perfect circle, each facing inward. They were alive but catatonic, their eyes staring at nothing. Elena had used a combination of Zephyrian pheromones and pressure point stimulation to induce a permanent state of terror. They would never speak or move again. By the time the Crimson Dawn reached Titan, 30% of its crew was either dead or psychologically broken. Meanwhile, Ghost Thompson's ship materialized inside the Zephyrian formation like a whisper of death. His stealth technology was beyond anything in the Zephyrian arsenal. Developed by human engineers who understood that sometimes the best weapon was the one the enemy never saw coming, Thompson had spent his imprisonment studying Zephyrian fleet tactics. He knew exactly which ships to hit first. His first target was a communications relay cruiser. Thompson's ship phased through its shields as if they didn't exist. He materialized on the bridge, moving faster than Zephyrian reflexes could track. 12 officers died in as many seconds. Their bodies arranged to spell out human words in their own blood. The message was simple: "We are coming." He was gone before their backup systems could even register the breach. The next target was a supply vessel. Thompson infiltrated during a routine crew rotation, replacing a returning engineer. For 6 hours, he moved through the ship, systematically eliminating key personnel and replacing them with perfectly crafted holograms. The crew continued their duties, unaware that half their number were already dead. When the battle began, the supply ship exploded from within, its death broadcast on all frequencies for the fleet to see. Professor Morrison took a different approach entirely. His transport ship appeared to surrender, broadcasting standard distress signals. When the Zephyrian patrol ship brought him aboard, they found a kindly old man reading poetry, apparently lost and confused. "Please," Morrison said in perfect Zephyrian, "I don't want any trouble. I was just trying to reach the academic conference on Kepler 9, the patrol ship's captain." Commander Veltar was amused. Humans were so pathetic. He decided to interrogate this one personally, perhaps extract some useful intelligence before killing him. Morrison was brought to the captain's ready room, where Veltar dismissed his guards. He wanted privacy for this. "You're going to tell me about human fleet movements," Veltar said, activating a pain inducer. "And then I'm going to space you." Morrison looked up from his book with mild interest. Commander Veltar, 43 years old. 2 children on the homeworld. Your daughter just started her first year at the military academy. Veltar froze. How could this human know such things? Your son is studying art, which disappoints you, Morrison continued conversationally. Your mate Solana works in the genetics department on Zephyr Prime, Building 14, Level 7 Laboratory Complex C. The color drained from Veltar's blue skin. How do you know these things? Morrison smiled that grandfatherly smile. I make it my business to know about anyone I'm going to kill. Your entire extended family, Commander. 47 individuals. I have their names, their addresses, their daily routines. He closed his book and stood up. Despite being shorter and apparently frail, he suddenly seemed to fill the room with menace. Here's what's going to happen, Morrison said gently. You're going to order your ship to broadcast the following message to your fleet. Then you're going to kill yourself. If you don't, I'll escape from this ship and spend the next 5 years systematically hunting down everyone you've ever loved. Veltar reached for his weapon. Morrison moved. When the guards finally entered the ready room, they found their commander apparently unharmed but broadcasting surrender orders to the entire Zephyrian fleet. His hands shook uncontrollably as he transmitted detailed fleet positions and tactical information. Then, he put his sidearm to his head and pulled the trigger. Morrison had vanished completely on the human command station. Admiral Reeves watched the tactical display in amazement. The massive Zephyrian fleet was falling apart before it even reached combat range. Ships were exploding from within, communications were being jammed by their own vessels, and several cruisers had simply stopped responding to orders. Sir, Commander Park reported, we're receiving surrender broadcasts from 12 different Zephyrian ships. They're transmitting their entire tactical database. Casualties? Reeves asked. None, sir. Our defensive platforms haven't fired a shot. Across the battlefield, the Devil's Dozen continued their work with methodical precision. Victor, the surgeon, Petrov had infiltrated a Zephyrian medical facility disguised as a wounded prisoner. By the time his identity was discovered, he had already performed experimental procedures on 30 officers, leaving them alive but permanently disabled. Sarah, Black Widow, Martinez had seduced the captain of a heavy cruiser during a false prisoner exchange, then systematically poisoned his entire senior staff during what appeared to be a diplomatic dinner. The ship drifted helplessly, its crew too terrified to leave their quarters. James, Nightmare. Foster had hijacked the fleet's communication network and was broadcasting a continuous stream of psychological warfare designed specifically for Zephyrian brain patterns. Entire crews were abandoning their ships, their minds broken by audio-visual patterns that exploited their species. Evolutionary fears, the other 6 members of the dozen were equally effective, each using their specialized skills to maximum effect. They moved through the Zephyrian fleet like a plague, destroying not through force but through terror, chaos, and precisely applied brutality. Admiral Vexenara watched his fleet disintegrate around him with growing horror. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. His ships were being destroyed from within by enemies who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Admiral, his communications officer reported, voice shaking, we're receiving a transmission. Human origin. Put it through, Vexenara ordered. The holographic display showed Admiral Reeves, sitting calmly in his command chair. Behind him, the human defensive platforms remained silent and unthreatened. Admiral Vexenara, Reeves said pleasantly, I believe you wanted to destroy our supply depot. How's that working out for you? What are you? Vexenara whispered. What kind of monsters have you unleashed? The kind you created when you murdered our medical personnel, Reeves replied. Every species has its devils, Admiral. Ours just happen to be very, very good at their job. Another explosion bloomed on Nexanara's tactical display as one of his heavy cruisers imploded. His own ship's crew was reporting mysterious disappearances, equipment failures, and what appeared to be systematic psychological attacks. "This is impossible," Nexanara said. 12 humans cannot destroy an entire fleet. 12 ordinary humans, perhaps, Reeves agreed. But these aren't ordinary humans. These are the ones we keep locked away because they scare us. The ones who make other monsters check under their beds at night. As if summoned by his words, Dr. Elena Vasquez materialized on the Crimson Dawn's bridge. She had been there all along, invisible in plain sight, wearing a perfect holographic disguise. In her hands were the heads of Nexanara's senior staff. "Hello, Admiral," she said pleasantly. "I've been waiting to meet you." Nexanara reached for his weapon. Elena moved like liquid death, her blade opening his throat before he could complete the motion. As he fell, she leaned close to whisper in his ear, "This is for the children in the medical bay." Across the Zephyrian fleet, similar scenes played out on dozens of ships. The Devil's Dozen had turned the invasion force into a slaughterhouse, using tactics so brutal and efficient that even hardened Zephyrian warriors were fleeing in panic.